Hello and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and today we are going to, first of all, put our branding back on the screen. Oh, it's there. You can't see it. Okay. The background is wintry, blizzardy, blustery. Actually, I had uh, ambitions, if that's the right word. I had grand ambitions to put the actual blizzard on behind me, to reorient the studio so that the big window here would you'd be able to see the actual blizzard going on, the actual storm happening behind me. But unfortunately, due to technical difficulties dealing with light and shadow, uh, I would have been basically in the dark. My face would have been in the dark, and all you would have seen behind me is the storm. So that's what happens when you have too much backlight and you don't have enough front light to compensate. And when I tried to compensate for the light, I just was completely washed out. So I was like a ghost in the middle of a blizzard. It was unfortunately, this is the best I could do. But probably if you are in North America, all you need to do is look out a window. And chances are, even if you are not in the midst of a storm, a winter storm, then at least you are probably experiencing some form of deep freeze. Certainly if you're in Canada, Northern Canada, or Western Canada. So in any case, as the description for today's live stream suggests, the snowmageddon or snow apocalypse or ice apocalypse or whatever they're calling this thing down in the States. Whenever there's a big storm event like this, it's an opportunity for us on the path to reflect upon just what do we do? How do we face the storms in our lives? Last week, we were talking about what to do when we are uninspired. And the conclusions that we came to revolved around preparation, doing the work, preparing ourselves for when inspiration comes. Because you're wandering in the desert, or you're in the midst of a drought, a creative drought, a drought of inspiration. No drought lasts forever. Nothing lasts forever. So, as we discussed last week, when you are uninspired, it's not a matter of trying to dig yourself out of that and somehow try to force inspiration to come, but it's about how can you use that time to continue to work on yourself and better prepare yourself for when inspiration does eventually arrive. But as we know from our own experience, there's a lot more that can arrive in our life. It's not a this or that equation. It's not binary in any sense that, oh, I'm in a state of being uninspired or I'm an inspiration, and those are the two states. There are other things that can arrive. And these other things include tests, trials, ordeals, and they can hit us with a tremendous force of nature, so to speak. And we can find ourselves in the midst of stormy seas. Or if you look out your window, in the midst of a chilling, freezing, icy, snowy, whiteout blizzard. It's one thing to be wandering in the desert. And of course, we talked about last week how at nighttime, the desert becomes frigid. It becomes very cold at night in the desert. But for those of you familiar with northern climes, you know that the tundra, the vast swaths of open land, of permafrost, that's ground that is frozen 365 days of the year. Permanently frozen ground. Very little grows there. No trees. So, and you're dealing with snow and ice and wintry conditions all year round. And there's very little in the way of liquid water. Everything's frozen. It's a very harsh environment indeed. It is, in its own right, a kind of desert. But there can be, in that particular desert, storms, monumental, right? Storms of a biblical nature, with wind gusts and wind chills that are off the charts. That's why this particular blizzard, this winter storm that they're making a fair big deal out of down in the States, at least, especially in the southern states that are, they're accustomed to getting storms, but at the same time, they're not as accustomed as we are in Canada, or others are, let's say, in Sweden, or certainly even in the northern United States or the Midwest, right? The southern states, that they're familiar with snow and ice and so on in wintertime, but they're not so familiar with it that they're comfortable with it, that they know how to drive, for instance, on the ice and snow. And that's why it's, and they don't get winter tires, for instance, in the southern US. And that's why when they do get snow and ice, you have those multi-car pileups and everything that happen. Because in a practical sense, they're not really prepared. And then when the news announces this colossal snowmageddon or ice apocalypse or whatever hyperbolic language that they're using, because fear sells and tragedy sells, and that's what gets ratings on the news, they have to hype everything up. And so when these individuals who are not truly prepared, because they don't really have the experience, they're hit with the news that some colossal biblical winter event is rolling into their territory, well, they panic and they run out and they empty all the shelves in the stores, and they buy bread and toilet paper and kerosene and batteries and you name it, everything they think that they're going to need, for a week of being snowed in. And the reason why I mention this is you can verify this for yourself. How individuals who are not accustomed to these sorts of storms in their life, how they react. And you can decide for yourself just how much they are overreacting, and in what ways their reactions to the storms, what that reveals about the nature of the human condition in the face of tests and trials and ordeals and the inevitable challenges which confront us. And we are not taking this opportunity to use this climatic event, this winter occurrence, which we're calling a storm. We are not using this as an opportunity to judge others. Right? This is not an exercise in pointing fingers and in judging and in mocking and mocking and laughing at, belittling, or worse, making ourselves feel superior in some way, which very often you will see reflected in those commentators in northern climes who can't help but, point fingers and laugh at those, those hapless Southerners who are sliding around like they're in the funny papers, to quote a line from the film Driving Miss Daisy. No, we are using this as an opportunity to take experiential knowledge and real world case studies and actual facts, actual experiences, and observe how people react to storms, to being in storms, and then reflect upon ourselves and our own lives. Use that outer experience as a mirror, right? What was the line from the Bible? Do not point out the splinter in thine enemy's eyes when you have a log in your eye. That's the essence of the quote. I can't remember the exact wording. The other quote is, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. We are not here casting stones. We are here from the spirit of, that which you do unto the least of my brothers, you do unto me. Feel into the profound humility of that statement. That Jesus made that statement. And he said, what you do to the least of my brothers, to the most hapless, the most unprepared, the most downtrodden, the poorest, the most simple, you do unto me. We too should seek to adopt that level of radical humility. And we look to the world around us, and we look to our brothers and sisters, wherever they are in this world, facing whatever storms they find themselves surrounded with. And it's an opportunity for us to truly empathize with what they're going through, to put ourselves in their shoes, to try to walk a mile in their shoes, not least by reflecting upon when we were in the midst of storms and what was our behavior like? How did we react? Were we always calm and cool-headed and, right, level-headed? Did we overreact? Did we panic in certain situations in our lives? Of course we have. Everybody has. And so in making that connection, we can use this happenstance and apply the Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below, as within, so without. The storm that is hitting North America right now, out there, is a mirror and a foreshadowing of the storms that have yet to hit our lives in microcosm and in here. And in here. Heart, mind, and body. Now, the inevitability of storms entering our lives and confronting us and surrounding us, overwhelming us, completely engulfing us, is unquestionable when we're on the path. These storms can take many forms, as you know, because you have experienced them. And no one can encapsulate or limit the nature of those storms, the many, many forms that those storms can take. They can be financial. They can be climatic. They can be medical, right? Storms related to health and well-being, but they can also be emotional, psychological storms. They can be multifaceted storms that involve multiple different aspects of our lives. They can be political storms, and they can be combinations of vocational storms and emotional storms and relationship storms and family and you name it. It's impossible for somebody to make a comprehensive list. But we can make certain observations about their nature and peel back the layers of the details and get closer to the essence of the storm. In the past, I have mentioned initiations. And initiations are tests that apply to our innermost being. They are trials that our innermost undertakes in the supernal worlds in order to advance to the next level in their spiritual development. We don't receive initiations. Initiations are not for us. They're for our higher self. However, in accordance with the Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below, we often experience a shadowy reflection of the initiation that our innermost is undertaking in the supernal worlds. We will often experience that initiation as some kind of a test or a trial or an ordeal here in our lives. And yes, very often it will feel like some kind of a storm has struck us. We find ourselves in the midst of struggling to navigate ourselves through. And one of the defining features of an initiation is that it will correspond to one of the 4 primary elements: earth, wind, fire, and water. Which means that the storms that we encounter in our lives, generally speaking, if we are very observant and paying attention, close attention, we should be able to discern at the heart, at the root of that circumstance, that storm, the essential nature of one of those 4 elements will somehow predominate or dominate that storm. And in that way, we can have a direct experiential knowing of the initiation that our innermost is undertaking in the supernal worlds. And each, I'm not, I don't have enough knowledge of the internal process and path. I don't have access to that. All right, I've read about it. I've read what others have said about it, but I personally don't have enough direct knowledge that I can share with you the exact process and which levels. And they have names like the 3rd initiation of fire and the 4th initiation of water, and they're numbered and they're layered and they're staggered, and it's like a whole process. And the reason why I don't have any information about that, because it doesn't concern us. It doesn't. It concerns our innermost. I find that Gnostics who spend all this time and energy memorizing all these initiations and those initiations and what order they go in and everything else and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, it's all intellectual, it's all academic. And it's academic because they have nothing to say about it. Meaning we have to endure what we have to endure, but how we endure it is very different than what our innermost experiences. The only connecting link, the only connecting tissue is that defining essence of the storm that we face will be connected to the element of whichever initiation our innermost is undertaking. But that initiation is not ours. It doesn't belong to the mortal. It belongs to the being. That said, the storm that we face, we have to face it. And how we face it has a direct connection to our innermost. And knowing this, feeling this, allowing ourselves to experience this provides us, or let's say affords us, a profound advantage in confronting and facing and enduring the storms that enter our lives. Now, what exactly do I mean? Can I give an example? I've used this example before, and it's I use it because it's so clear. It was so obvious when I was living in Toronto and I was regularly attending Tiger Dragon Kung Fu, which at the time, that Kung Fu studio was in a basement in a part of Toronto called Corso Italia along St. Clair. And Sifu Carey and his wife had gone to the World Kung Fu Championships. And while they were gone, they wanted us to look after the place, but also to continue holding classes. So Sifu Carey entrusted us with essentially with house sitting, right? But it was a kung fu studio, and also teaching classes and just conducting things as usual. And this happened in the summer, and there was a tremendous, freakish summer storm that hit Toronto. And it was a ridiculous amount of water fell in a very, very short period of time. I don't remember the exact figures, but Toronto being, over 150, 200 years old, has a very aging infrastructure. And that infrastructure was immediately and easily overwhelmed by this deluge of water. I mean, it truly was like a freakish, sudden storm came out of nowhere and dumped an apocalyptic amount of rain on the city. And I recall barely being able to drive to the studio because it was like zero visibility. It was raining so hard. I had not experienced rain like this outside of Japan in the middle of a typhoon. So it really was this freakish storm. But I did make it to the studio, and we did, because it was in the basement. I mean, once we were inside in the basement, we were cut off from the outside and didn't, the storm wasn't really bothering us at that point, except that the runoff from this storm completely overwhelmed the drainage system and the water management systems of the city. And all of the drain pipes backed up, and a reverse water pressure applied. So the washrooms in the basement, the toilets began erupting with sewer water. And I mean, like, as it sounds, erupting from the toilet bowl was basically the sludge out of the sewer system, because the water pressure was so great. The water drainage was completely overwhelmed. And so this negative pressure built up, and the water had to go somewhere. And so it went back into the sewers and started pushing backwards up the sewer drainage system. And of course, everybody's toilets started erupting. And of course, these are toilets down in the Kung Fu studio. started overflowing, but it was like gushing. It was like out of a movie, like out of a Hollywood movie, right? And when this happened, for whatever reason, I was uh, gripped by a knowing, a a commanding confidence in the moment. It 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 came over me like, it's hard to describe. It was just there. It, and in that moment, I just knew what to do. And I immediately, everybody else around me was panicking and freaking out and running around. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And I just knew what to do. I immediately started giving commands. Okay, everybody, take all the valuable things and get it up off the floor, and get all the mats up, and get all the mats and everything that has value, get it up off the floor and put it up high. So we were stacking, uh, again, the valuable things that were on the floor. We were getting it up onto furniture and other things. So this sludge that was seeping into the studio wouldn't ruin everything. I mean, some things were going to get ruined. That was inevitable, but at least the most valuable things were going to be preserved this way. The second thing was, I ran to the janitor closet, and I found some mops and some other such tools, and I told people to start, putting them down. I said, find anything absorptive, any towels, anything like that of nature, and put them down and try to create barriers and so on. And I ran because where I worked at the time was just a few doors down. And I knew that we had a shop vac in the office. So I very quickly ran to the office, and I grabbed the shop vac, and I came back down, and I began using the shop vac to suction up, to vacuum up the water, because it was a wet dry vacuum cleaner, right? So I started bailing the water out by vacuuming it up, then pouring it back down the drain, which had now subsided, right? Because it had overflown, but then it stopped overflowing. And so I was, and this and other actions that just came to me spontaneously, and I just allowed myself to go with it. And as things came to me, I just went with it. I didn't second guess. I didn't try to think it through. I didn't try to interfere. And the long and the short of the story is, what could have ended up as a real disaster, we ended up preserving and making it far less of a, wasn't as disastrous. It was the ill effects and long-term effects on the studio were far less than they could have been. And Sifu Carey and his wife, when they returned from the World Championships, of course, they saw the damage, because there was damage. They saw, and we had to relay the story, but Sifu recognized that something interesting had taken place. And then when he talked to me about it one-on-one, he said, and you did all this? I said, yeah. And he said, and it was like you were on autopilot, right? And I thought about it, and I said, yeah, it sort of was like that. And he's like, yeah. He's like, it's he says, that's what the top martial artists describe when they're in tournaments, sparring. That's what the Shaolin monks describe when they're doing their martial arts, where you get to this level where you're just a vehicle, and the kung fu is moving through you. He said it sounds like that's what you were experiencing, and I was like, well, it was very much like that. And it was because my innermost was undergoing an initiation of water. And that was reflected in my life down here in this mortal realm as this flood event. And in that moment, I wasn't qualified. None of us are qualified to take initiations, to conduct initiations. Initiations are not for us. They're for our innermost. So when the corresponding storm hits us and we feel this impulse, this being gripped by this something that wants to move through us, and this quiet confidence just suddenly shows up. Okay. Just let go and allow ourselves to be moved in the midst of this looming catastrophe which has befallen us or is befalling us. We will know exactly what to do if we allow ourselves to be done, to be a human being done. And therein lies the secret that only initiates on the path truly know. And it requires a little bit of esoteric study, a little bit of knowledge related to the path in order to comprehend that the more catastrophic the storm and the more clearly we can discern a dominant element at play, when we are gripped and moved to act in the midst of that, we can have the confidence that this is our innermost now, who he needs to be in charge because this is his test. And our test is whether or not we can let go and let God, whether we can allow ourselves for a few moments in the midst of unfolding catastrophe, unfolding calamity, the cacophony of the storm that has been unleashed, and recognize I'm not qualified. But I am fit to be led. I am fit to serve. And then we give ourselves to our higher self. And then we become conscious cooperators in the initiation process. And then we participate in the initiation in our own way, at our own level, by recognizing that we're not qualified to make decisions and judgments. We're not qualified to take an initiation. But if we give ourselves to that entity who is qualified and who is actually taking that initiation, and for whom that initiation was specifically designed and tailored in accordance with his level, we can consciously and actively, proactively participate and support. And we can assist our innermost being undergoing the initiation by allowing him to assist us in the storm that is the expression of that initiation here on earth in our lives. Do you see the reciprocal nature of this, right? And why I've so often said we are not human doings, but human beings. And especially when we are in a storm, especially when we face cataclysmic odds, that is when it is most important for us to be a human being done, because that is the true nature of those storms. The ones that we can discern have a unique element that dominates their nature. Then we can say, okay, my innermost is this is probably an initiation. Okay, I'm gonna let my innermost drive me. I'm the vehicle. Let my innermost take the wheel. And if you do this, you will be driven, you will be moved, you will be compelled into action, and there will be this confidence, this knowing. You will just simply know what to do. Bang, 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 bang. And if there are others around you, you will command them, you will direct them, not in a malevolent, bossy sort of way, just in a matter-of-fact way, in a curt, pragmatic, matter-of-fact, not being bossy, not being controlling, simply matter-of-fact. The people around you will be hapless and out of sorts, and they won't know what to do, and they'll just turn to you, and you say, okay, why don't you go do this, and you can do this, and why don't you grab that and do this and grab this and pull this there and bring that over here and do this and go and help those people and go and do, right? And it'll just be boom, 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 boom. And you will delegate, and it'll just happen. You will be done. And in the process of being done, you will help others around you get things done. The things that need to be done, the things that need to happen in order to mitigate the effects of this storm, in order to cope with, deal with, handle the storm that is raging. And while in the case that I gave you, the storm was outside, right? But the flood, and it was a flood of sludge. I mean, it was, if you've ever experienced sewer pipes backing up, I mean, it's a very different kind of flood and a very different kind of storm. But it was what it was. Other examples of this, you might have, for example, an emotional storm, or a relationship storm, or a storm involving others, and there might be an element of burning. If you feel your heart or your mind burns, and there's this sweltering, this heat, this burning rage, or like if anything could be a fire, you could actually find yourself in the middle of a fire, or a fire could decimate your home, and incinerate all of your belongings, I mean, there are different ways that we can experience the element of fire. Likewise, we can experience the element of water in different ways. There can be different ways. It doesn't have to be a literal flood or a literal rainstorm. It's the nature and the essence of the element itself that can be reflected in the storm that we're facing. So water, for example, if we think of Aquarius, the water bringer, is defined by constant rapid change. So imagine a scenario where you're dating, you're trying to hold down relationships, and it's like one date after another, after another, after another, and you can't seem to nail down a relationship, or you can't seem to nail down a job, and you float from one job to another, or you're so some sort of rapid, constant change, and you're constantly being inundated by impermanence. Well, that's water. But it could also be, again, the element of water, other ways in which that can create a kind of storm in your life. Um, I don't know if you've ever had an experience of drowning or near drowning, right? There are other ways in which, and again, as I said at the outset, there's no one can limit the expressions of storms, and no one can limit and say, oh well, if it's the element of earth, then it's only going to manifest in these ways. So earth being solidity, the mineral kingdom, and the storm could be one of you being stuck, and everything around you just seems like petrified. Not petrified in the sense of fear, but petrified in the sense of everything turned to stone. It's an interesting way to think about a storm, but a storm of everything around you is just, there's no mobility, there's no movement. It's like everything around you is like frozen in living rock. But there could be other ways that your innermost is facing a trial of earth. There are earthquakes here on earth. There are landslides. There are cases of people being buried alive. There are cases of things collapsing, houses, foundations. These could all be initiations of earth. Anything related to that hume, that humus, right? But then when you think about your body is hume. Your body is earth. Yes, it's 80% water, fine. But it's earth, in the same way that soil has water in it, moisture in it. But the minerals are the minerals, right? You can have all the water in the world, but if you don't have the minerals, you don't have a body. You can't survive, right? Because even the water that's inside of you can conduct electricity without electrolytes, which are minerals, which are salt. salts, magnesium, potassium, calcium, sodium, etc. So there are, if you find yourself in a prolonged storm, meditating on its nature can produce profound insights. But again, most importantly, is to recognize that if you are overwhelmed by a storm, to let go and let God, to let yourself be guided through the storm that overwhelms you, that inundates, it makes you feel very small, and that has whiteout conditions. You can't see 2 feet in front of you. So how do you know where to go? Right? Let your intuition be your guide, and have faith, put your faith and trust in your innermost, who is the one who is actually undertaking this test, this trial, this ordeal. Likewise, we could experience the worldly manifestation of an initiation of air. Now, air is mind, manas. And so, but it's also electricity. It's rapid movement. But it's not like water, which is change, but it can be similar. It can feel similar, but it will be more mental, more intellectual, more related on that level. But it could also be windstorms, right? It could also be, your house blowing over. It could be a tornado. It could be a hurricane, right? It could also be that, but it could also be a tornado in your head. It could be a hurricane in your mind. It could be experiencing some kind of a mental breakdown or episode where you just simply cannot quiet your mind no matter what you do. It could be that your innermost is undergoing an initiation of wind. It could also be you're confronted by some dilemma, some conundrum, and that your mind is racing to try to arrive at an answer, but an answer won't come. It could be wow, it could be so many other again, just using your imagination, or perhaps reflecting on things that you've undergone in the past, storms that you've been through already. And when you contemplate on a windstorm, on a swirling vortex, like a tornado or a hurricane, and you're in the midst of that, and how does that feel? How do you feel when you're caught in a windstorm like that? And how does it feel when you have a storm like that in your mind, in your psychology, in your life, in other areas, but they take on that characteristic? They have that feeling to them. To be able to, the reason why we end with that windstorm is because in the eye of the storm is a place of stillness. And in order to be able to successfully face and navigate the storm and to indeed receive the guidance, the insights, the directives, the direction, all of that comes through that still point, that stillness in the eye of the storm. And what we can say unequivocally is that in your life, a storm that you face, you are in the eye of the storm. Or rather, the eye of the storm is within you. So if the storm is raging in your head, or the storm is raging in your heart, or the storm is raging in your body, or any combination of your three brains, the still point, the eye of the storm, a space of calm, of peace, is within you. How do you get there? How do you access that? Can you even put yourself in that space? And this connects back to last week's live stream about preparation and being prepared. And if we have to prepare ourselves for when inspiration arrives, we especially have to prepare ourselves for when the storm shows up. And how do we prepare? By practicing going into that still point within ourselves. And we practice observing ourselves and observing everything that's happening around us and within us, and everything that's happening in our three brains. Because the still point of the observer is within us. When we put ourselves in a stance, in an attitude, we orient ourselves appropriately to the practice of self-observation, and we observe ourselves objectively, detached, unidentified, then we have oriented ourselves and put ourselves into that still point of the observer. And we practice this, we learn how to do this in meditation, and we practice it every moment of every day through self-observation. We're preparing, we're getting good at spending time in that still point. So when the storm hits, we are familiar, we are practiced, we are prepared in standing in the eye of the storm. So no matter how intense that storm and how crazy it is and how whiteout conditions it is and what's being blown around in the, we can just observe it all. We can say, well, that's interesting. And we can be honest, that's intense. That's sudden, that's unexpected. But we're still just observing. And because we are observing, and if we have been practicing and preparing properly, then we know that self-observation comes with a second component, which is self-remembering. In other words, when we are observing ourselves, we observe with one eye in and one eye out. We are observing everything that's happening around us, but we're observing everything that's happening within us, and we are remembering who it is who's on the other side of that still point, that pinhole camera inside of us. Who is on the other side of the 0 point? We're remembering our higher self. We're remembering our divine mother as we are observing everything that's happening inside of us and everything that's happening around us. So that when the storm hits, we've got one eye in and one eye out. And we're observing everything that's happening around us, and we're observing everything that's happening in us, and we're remembering who is on the other side of that still point, which is our innermost and our divine mother. And if we are doing that, if we are practiced in that, then we will receive through that still point, through that place of peace and calm and stillness, the answers will come. The direction will come. The guidance will come. And the quiet confidence of what to do, when, and in what order will be there. It's very similar to being inspired, because the root word of inspired is in spirit. But whereas we think of inspiration as, making art or, so on and so forth, it could be being creative and building things and making things and so on, right? To navigate a storm, we don't think of that as inspiration to be guided through the storm. And yet, that is what it is, because it's the same process. It's the same metaphysical point of connection. Our connection to our higher self is our connection to our higher self. Whether we are being inspired to create a masterwork of art, or whether we are being guided to face and navigate and cope with some calamitous, disastrous storm that is taking place in our lives. To be in spirit is to be guided and led by spirit, to surrender to that spirit and to allow that spirit to move us in the literal sense of that word, to be moved by spirit, to become a vessel, a vehicle, an agent of spirit. That spirit which is flowing through our higher self. That spirit that our higher self is utilizing to face the initiations he is facing in the supernal worlds. And the spirit that is moving through him down into us and through us into the world. It is that spirit that connects us and makes us all one. And it is that spirit that moves us to leap into the fray, to leap headlong into the path of ongoing danger for the sake of others, for instance. That spirit that moves us to sacrifice ourselves for the sake of others, or to guide them, to help them overcome their fear and their panic in the wake of the storm that they find themselves in. To be inspired, to be in spirit, is to surrender, to become an agent of that spirit, to be moved by, to be a conduit for. Remember that a vessel is a vehicle, but also a container which carries, just like a vehicle does. We use a vessel to carry water from the well or from the spring and bring it to the village. It's a vessel. Again, coming back to water for whatever reason. A vessel floats on the water and carries people across the water, or a vessel holds water and carries water. It's interesting that we have the same word to describe similar yet very different functions, because one vessel floats on the water and the other vessel carries the water within it. But therein lies the simple strategy, directive, practice, process to face storms in our lives. Now, you might say this is all easier said than done, but this is why we have to prepare. This is why we practice. Because naturally, if you are terrified of crowds, you have terrible stage fright, but you're a musician and you have to give a concert, you can't just wing it. You can't wait until the day of the concert, until the moment that you step out on stage and you sit down at the piano and you see the score for the first time and you start playing it for the first time in front of a live audience. It doesn't work that way. You have to prepare for that concert. You have to practice that piece. And you practice it over and over and over again until what? Until you become very familiar with it, until the piece that you want to play in your concert becomes second nature. You know it in and inside and out. It is, you are one with it. It's a part of you. So then when you present it in front of an audience, you are now truly giving them a part of who you are. You have integrated that music into yourself. It's part of who you are as a musician. And because that is the case, your spirit can now move the music and move through the music to move the audience. Because you have practiced this process. And you've allowed yourself to become one with the music such that the music moves you And the spirit moves through you and through the music you are playing to move others. But you have to prepare, you have to practice. And storms that arrive in our lives, we want to prepare ourselves for those inevitabilities. Are we able to make that connection? Are we able to be in that still point, such that no matter what's happening around us and within us psychologically, emotionally, physically, in our sensations and our reactions, can we simply observe those reactions, not identify, not attach to them? And in that still point of observation, can we receive the true guidance? And can we be moved to action even amidst the cacophony of thoughts and beliefs and overreactions and panic and everything else that might be happening inside of us in reaction and response to this crazy circumstance swirling around us? In that sense, the third eye is the eye of the storm. And the atom nous, the we atom in our heart, that pinhole camera, that 0 point, through which we can receive and be moved, through which we can be a human being done. But we have to practice. When everything's calm, when everything's normal, when everything's boring in our lives, with like the mundane things that we do, are we present? Are we aware? Or are we, multitasking? Right? Where we're doing our chores around the house, we're dusting, we're vacuuming, we're mopping the floors, we're doing laundry, we're doing whatever. Are we doing what we're doing? Are we present and aware and conscious and paying attention to what we are doing? Or is our mind someplace else? Are we listening to podcasts? Are we thinking about the future or worrying about the past, or reverse, worrying about the future and fretting about the past? Remember, last week I spoke at length around before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. That same teaching applies to before the storm, chop wood, carry water. During the storm, chop wood, carry water. Be present, be aware, be observant. And be, as Samael famously said, be as a guard during a time of war. Because when the proverbial shit hits the fan, and when the storm rolls in, you better believe that the adversary is going to be activated, and that our egos, our animal instincts, and the mechanical algorithms associated to self-preservation, they are going to light up. They are going to come into activity, and they are going to be charged with incredible energy, and they are going to want to execute their algorithms. They're going to want to execute their program. They are going to want to possess us in those moments. possess us with fear, with panic, with the desire to control, with the desire to change, or the desire to run, to avoid, or any number of reactions. The desire to go and curl up, or to stuff our face with carbohydrates or alcohol or some other drug to numb us from the pain, the stress, the anxiety, the discomfort. We have to be ready for that. We have to be prepared for that. And we have to have some form of experience dealing with and coping with these particular psychological aggregates that make up our psychology. And there's only one way to prepare for the onslaught that we experience in the midst of a storm. It's the same way that a boxer trains for a prize fight. He has sparring partners. And he goes into the ring on a regular basis. And he trains with sparring partners, and he practices certain techniques, certain strategies, or learning how to counter certain strategies. One of my favorite documentaries is When We Were Kings. And it's a documentary about the Rumble in the Jungle. It's the infamous fight between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman in Zaire, Africa. And it's a devastatingly good documentary. That's an infamous fight, and it's just, but the reason why I bring it up is because in that documentary, they talk about how Muhammad Ali was preparing himself to face off against George Foreman, who was quite a bit larger, stronger. And so Muhammad Ali prepared for that fight by sparring with larger, heavier, but also somewhat slower sparring partners. I'm not going to say any more than that, in case you haven't seen it or are unfamiliar with the fight. But it's if you like documentaries, you don't have to like boxing, by the way, to enjoy this documentary. But it's a really good one. But the point is that in many ways, whether it's the analogy of a concert pianist giving a live performance, or a boxer getting into the ring for the heavyweight championship and the world is watching, these represent their own kind of storm. These are profound tests of mind, body, and spirit. But they are trials, they are ordeals that we cannot just wing it. We have to prepare ourselves. And it doesn't mean that we go through life, doing some kind of holding some kind of emergency drills in our lives, or it's we don't have to sit and catastrophize 24/7, 365 days of the year in order to prepare. No, we just have to be. We just have to observe ourselves and remember ourselves and practice that and know ourselves. Become very familiar with our fear, with our anxiety, with our need to control, or our desire to change circumstances around us. Because when the shit hits the fan, all of those defects and vices, they're going to be dialed up to 11. And if you're not prepared to face them because you haven't faced them, you haven't been sparring with them throughout the year, throughout your life, then when the big test comes, when the big storm comes, you're not going to be prepared to resist them, and you're going to fall, you're going to become possessed by them. And they're going to end up controlling you, and forget about the initiation and forget about receiving guidance from your innermost being. You're not going to be able to receive guidance from your innermost being because you're being possessed by fear. And you're going to be reacting mechanically, automatically, unconsciously. You're going to be reacting to the circumstances around you. And you cannot respond. You cannot give yourself. You cannot surrender. You cannot let go and let God if your demons have their clutches in you and if you're a marionette, if you're a puppet for your demons, well, there's no bandwidth left. There's no room. There's no space for your innermost being to drive you. This is entirely what dictates whether or not we successfully navigate the storms in our lives. Do we know ourselves? Can we discern the difference between unconscious mechanical animal reactions and calm, confident, conscious responses? And do we know the difference, and can we experience the difference between being gripped and possessed and enslaved to our mechanical animal algorithms that automatically and reflexively react to the disasters in our lives, to the calamities, the storms, the strife? Or can we observe that cacophony wanting to take hold in our heart, in our mind, in our body? Can we observe all of that and not submit to it, not give in to that temptation, or not allow ourselves to be enslaved by that mechanical, automatic reflex action, but instead to surrender peacefully, prudently, and with quiet confidence? Surrender to the guidance and the prudence and the affirmation that comes from our innermost being. I had to pull down the blinds here because it was too bright. So I don't know what the status of the storm is right now outside my window. Earlier, the snow was literally moving horizontally across my window. It wasn't falling as much as it was just blowing left to right. But it was falling, but it was just falling sideways. So I will have, like many people in North America, have a lot of snow to clear tomorrow. Oh, we got a comment from Eduardo here. He said, "Chop wood, carry water." Yes, that was one of the defining idioms from last week, and we mentioned it here today again. Does anybody have any comments or questions about today, or about a storm that you might be facing, or about anything really? Let's see. Oops. No questions, no comments. Well, if no one has anything to say or ask, then I want to thank you for taking the time to be here with us this afternoon, and I hope that wherever you are, the the aftermath of whatever storm you're facing right now won't overwhelm you. If you're in North America, hopefully it's not too cold where you are, or not too snowy, or too icy, or too windy. But no matter what, I wish you a safe and happy weekend and a prosperous and productive week. And I will see you all next Sunday at 2 o'clock. And until then, be well, stay warm, stay dry, and stay safe, because we have to be practical as well, right? And when it comes to storms, especially winter storms, there is that aspect to them. So remember that as well. We can be prepared on multiple levels. It doesn't mean necessarily that you have to panic buy and go and empty all the shelves in the stores, but prudence can't hurt. So have a good week. And Benjamin says, "Thank you, sir." Well, thank you, Benjamin, for being here as always. And thank all of you again for being here. Have a great week. And as always, inverential peace. We'll see you next Sunday. Goodbye, everyone. Take care.